you know, the original saga was about the father, the children, and the grandchildren. And I mean, that's not a secret to anybody. It's even in the novels.
There were seven other books besides novelizations in the original Star Wars pantheon. There were the 3 Han Solo books, 3 Lando Calrissian books, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and of course novelizations. What I got to do was the first novelist who could write after Return of the Jedi and therefore use all the movie characters. So that gave me a great cast to work with. And it did kickstart the new era of the expanded universe.
Welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be covering the history of The Last Command. First released on hardback by Bantam Spectra in 1993, The Last Command is the last book in the Thrawn trilogy written by Timothy Zahn, which is preceded by Heir of the Empire and Dark Force Rising. And make sure you check out my previous 2 videos to get the full history of this project. Just like the other books in the series, The Last Command reached #1 in the New York Times bestseller list, and it was later adapted into a 6-issue comic book miniseries by Dark Horse Comics. This is also available in a graphic novel form, with an introduction provided by Shadows of the Empire author Steve Perry. It's to my knowledge that these comics are pretty compressed, leaving out some important elements, but they do pretty well at sticking to the narrative, and the art's really cool as well. Speaking of art, the artwork for the novel was done by Tom Jung, and in my opinion it got progressively better with each book. These are not void of criticism, but Tom Jung was also responsible for this masterpiece. He was chosen to produce the artwork for the original Star Wars movie, which was used as a theatrical poster for the advertising campaign. He was given the brief, good over evil, and according to Jung, the cross formed by Luke Skywalker's lightsaber, set against the background of Darth Vader, seemed to him like a good solution to that very theme. He also created my favourite poster for Empire Strikes Back, and an unused one for Return of the Jedi. There was also an audio cassette of the book, narrated by Anthony Daniels, and then later there was an unabridged audiobook version performed by Mark Thompson. A source book was published by West End Games, which includes complete information and game statistics on all of the characters, aliens, vehicles, droids, planets, and starships. Please read with me Timothy Zahn's own recollection of the novel. The final book of a trilogy is where everything that's been set up in the previous books gets wrapped together, hopefully bringing the story and character arcs to an exciting, satisfying, and memorable conclusion. It's also where the author hopes fervently that she hasn't forgotten some plot thread that's been left dangling. The title was supposed to be a small play on words. There was the obvious reference, the Emperor's last command to Mara. But there was also a spot in the book where someone commented on Han's assault team being the first command he'd been given for a while, and Han hoping it wouldn't be his last. Once again, that dual meaning got lost in some of the non-English translations. No big deal, but you kind of hate to set up wordplay that no one notices. But I got the story done, and the majority of the readers were happy with it, with other authors having been contracted to continue writing in the now named Expanded Universe. I moved on to other projects. Zahn not only gave a satisfying conclusion to his trilogy, but he made sure to leave some of those threads dangling, knowing that other books were to follow. Shortly after the release of The Last Command, Zahn was approached to write the conclusion to the Bantam era of books. He said he would only do it on the conditions that he could end the war with the Empire and that Luke and Mara would finally get together. Lucasfilm initially rejected the second of these terms, and so Zahn did not accept the offer. Later they changed their minds, and the Hand of Thrawn book became 2 novels, that being The Spectre of the Past and The Visions of the Future, which we will cover in future videos. So every author that wrote between Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy and his Thrawn duology were apparently aware that Luke and Mara were being set up to be together, but in their professionalism they didn't breathe a word to any of the fans, who were wondering why any love interest for Luke seemed to be written out of the stories.
Well, I always knew that Luke and Mara would be good for each other, but at the end of the Thrawn trilogy, it was way too soon to do anything of a romantic or that kind of relationship. It was they were barely starting to become friends, so it would have been very cheesy and very unrealistic to do anything there. I had always hoped something would happen, and about a year after Last Command came out, I was contacted by Bantam, asked if I would do a final book in their series, since I'd started out the Bantam series through the last one in the 12 that they had contracted to Lucasfilm for. And I told them I wanted to do two things. I wanted to end the war with the Empire, since it had been going on for 15 plus years, Star Wars timeline, and I wanted to get Luke and Mara together. And they said, fine for the first, but no for the second. I said, well, in that case, I'm not interested in doing the book, but thanks for asking. About 2 weeks later, they came back and said, well, okay, you can do that. The amusing part of that was that this was 93, I think, end of 93, end of 94, with Spectre of the Past coming out in 97, Vision of the Future 98. There were stories going on around the internet and the fan groups that Luke was poison to any relationship because Callista went off, and there were a couple other women he got involved with who disappeared then. And people were saying Lucasfilm has said that Luke will never have a full relationship. And I'm sitting there knowing that we've already got it set up, and the reason all the other women keep disappearing is all the other authors know it too, and so they are writing the female possible love interest out of the books, and no one ever breathed a word of it. There was a secret that came all the way to the end. All the writers were incredibly professional. No one leaked it. But it was a deliberate effort on everybody's part, but it was amusing to watch the speculation.
We've talked a bit about the character of Thrawn in the past, so listen here as Timothy Zahn explains how he came up with the character for Mara Jade.
I'd always thought that the opening of Return of the Jedi, the rescue of Han, was disconnected from the Rebellion plot line, which it is. I mean, it's the rescue of Han. But I thought when I started outlining the books, I thought it'd be nice to link those two plot lines together. Okay, well, since at the end of Empire, Vader has offered Luke an alliance to overthrow the Emperor might not have been happy with this whole thing. The easiest way to short circuit that is get rid of Luke. Okay, Han has been captured. This is a likely place for Luke to show up. Let's send an agent to kill him. Okay, what kind of agent? First of all, female, because there aren't enough strong females, and I thought she could be the same kind of personality, conflict foil to Luke that Han was to Leia. Just kind of flipped over. He's the farm boy. She could be something different. She has to be a Force user in order to defeat another Force user like Luke. And she has to be out of the chain of command so Vader will not get wind of what is happening. You put those together and the Emperor's hand falls out of the equation. And that was the origin of Mara.
I'd like to take another opportunity to address the misconception that George Lucas hated the character of Mara Jade.
As the creator of Mara Jade,
Wait! I am not the creator of Mara Jade, and I want you to get out of this office right now.
It wasn't her character, but her cosmopolitan look that he disliked, as told here by J.W. Rinsler.
They went out and got some sort of person who looked like she'd stepped out of a Cosmopolitan magazine to be the model for Mara, and he just thought the whole thing was so not Star Wars.
Something as major as a love interest for Luke Skywalker is something that would have been approved by George Lucas himself.
That's just a rumor that has kind of crawled up through fandom for years and years and years. I know that Tim met George Lucas. They had a sit-down conversation before the first book was done. I know that as with any of the novels, everything is cleared through Lucasfilm, and 100% for anything as major as a love interest being developed for Luke. That's a decision that George would have given a yes or no on.
A lot of George Lucas's involvement in the expanded universe was given a simple yes or no. So if he truly despised the character of Mara Jade, she would have been removed.
But, he didn't come to licensing and say, you have to kill her off. He just said, I'm not happy about it.
Model Shannon McRandall stated that her image was handpicked by George Lucas to be the face of Mara Jade. Up next is some of her experience in her own words.
If you read those books, you know everything about her. Tim wrote with such passion about her, and she was a very detailed character. So I knew to stand up straighter. I knew to lighten my hair a little bit to make it that orangey or red. I got green contacts and put those in. So when I went back the next time, they were really, I think, kind of wowed that I would put that much effort into what we thought then was just this tiny shoot. And Tim wrote Mara just so perfectly. I think that as fans and as readers of the books, we were able to see that kind of dichotomy in her, that she was a bad guy on a certain path that did what her boss told her to do. Nothing would get in her way. She had a mission, and that's that. And yet at the same time, she was her own person with her own thoughts and her own interests, and I think she was just beautifully complicated. I really got an understanding of how much more Star Wars was out there in the world, that just because they weren't making movies at the time didn't mean that you had to lose Star Wars from your life for a while. There's so much out there, whether you want to play a game, whether you want to dress up, whether you want to read a novel or a comic book. That being Mara, that one time introduced me to this world I never knew existed. But to have it develop from there, to have that one day evolve the way it did, because of the fans, because of the people that read the books, that participated in that poll on Insider that voted Mara Jade the most well-loved character never on screen.
Mara Jade also appeared in the radio dramatization of Return of the Jedi as a dancer in Jabba's palace, which was considered as G-canon at the time.
Those who got Thrawn back, give them time to come to the same conclusion we all have, that Mara should be back too.
Speaking of canon, Timothy Zahn actually provided an introduction to the Star Wars Encyclopedia, which was the definitive reference book of its time, collecting all the elements introduced into Star Wars canon and its evolving storyline. In recent years, after being hired by Disney to essentially rewrite the character of Thrawn for their new continuity, Zahn has persisted that the expanded universe was never canon.
And so Thrawn, as a character, is this phenomenally interesting character, and he was the first one that Star Wars is bringing, maybe last, we'll see. First one they're bringing from Legends, which is all the original EU of Star Wars, into the new canon.
Into canon, yes.
So,
not new canon, canon.
Into canon, not new canon.
Yes.
This is a complete contrast from what he previously stated when he told fans that a reboot would be very difficult to do.
If Lucasfilm decided to reboot the Star Wars EU after Return of the Jedi, would you guys want to be part of a reboot, or would you want other people to handle that?
A reboot would be really, really messy. There are currently 140 odd adult novels alone, not counting children's, young adults, art books, schematics and all that. 140 adult novels. To just say, okay, we're going to wipe those out, especially since many of them are still on the bookshelves, our bookstore shelves. What are you going to do? Are you going to say all these, we're going to stop selling them? Del Rey would not like that. Bantam would not like that. The publishing industry is taking enough of a hit these days as it is. A reboot would be immensely hard to do.
But the Star Wars universe is being actively maintained by a readership and a fan base that is vitally interested in what's going on, and so there would be immense pressure not to reboot.
This video concludes the compilation of all the evidence I've found of Timothy Zahn acknowledging that the expanded universe was in fact canon, and a lot of those clips you can find in the previous videos as well. It would seem that Zahn was used for his name's sake to help relegate EU to Legends, and basically to generate intrigue for Dave Filoni's Star Wars Rebels show, and then his services were no longer needed.
The downside is I now have 3 Thrawn trilogies. sometimes you do your job too well. So, but you know, it beats not being in work at all, and I get to have more Thrawn.
Despite his apparent betrayal of lore canon and continuity, his contribution to the Star Wars universe is fantastic. In particular, this trilogy's significance goes far beyond nostalgia. It's one of the cornerstones of Star Wars literature, being the first major work set after Return of the Jedi, and it set the precedent for future stories, inspiring an entire generation of writers. It revitalized the Star Wars franchise in the early 90s, proving that creative storytelling could breathe new life into a beloved universe. And years later, it remains to be widely celebrated and cherished by fans. So whether you're a long-term fan or a newcomer, the Thrawn trilogy is a must-read for anyone that's trying to get into the rich lore of Star Wars. For some EU fans, this trilogy is overrated, and some will tell you to start with the Truce of Bakura. But in my opinion, it's essential for starting your Star Wars Expanded Universe journey, and you'll come to discover just why they continue to resonate with fans to this day. For many fans, these books would be the closest thing they would ever get to in Episode 7, 8 and 9. But according to Timothy Zahn, he thinks of them as Episodes 6.1, 6.2 and 6.3.
I always thought of them as episodes 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3.
George Lucas himself stated that he was not interested in making sequels, mainly because he didn't have an idea for a story, like he did for the prequels. He said he wasn't interested in telling the story after the death of Darth Vader, that it was all told in the expanded universe. So when licensing approached him and asked him if they could do novels, he told them to do sequels because he wasn't going to make them. He later stated that the original saga was about the father, the children, and the grandchildren. It was even in the novels. While George was probably referencing the New Jedi Order that he helped develop, those grandchildren were first born in this very novel. Right folks, thanks so much for watching the video if you made it this far, and if nothing else I hope you at least found it informative. So as always, long live the expanded universe and lang may your lums reek. Now we're going to split the G. G stands for George Lucas. If I can split the G, everyone has to like and subscribe. Here we go. Ah, it's not level, let's see. Right, I'm not turning it off so you can, I'm not cheating. I really want you to like and subscribe, so I'm going to try that again. Right, if I don't split the G, you have to like and subscribe. Too bad folks. Cheers.